All right, Joe Lonsdale, welcome.
Thank you. Strongly agree with fixing the NIH. I was sitting at a wedding next to the person who's supposed to run it next, and I started to mention the same issues, and she started having a conniption and was really angry. So I definitely have some things to fix there.
Yeah, you have done a lot of interesting things with your life. Obviously, you're a famous builder and founder of companies and investor. You started a new think tank called the Cicero Institute, which is our neighbor in Austin. Welcome to Austin, by the way. I'm so glad that you moved there.
It's been a good few years there.
Yeah, you've done a lot. You've done a lot to make Austin a better and more interesting place.
We're doing our best. There's complicated politics in big cities, but Texas is a good place.
That's true. Tell us about that a little bit. So you moved from San Francisco. You wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal explaining why you're moving. And what I thought was interesting is you did a lot to evangelize, to bring a lot of your friends and colleagues and like-minded people to Austin. That network effect.
As you see in the election results in Texas and Florida this week. It's, Silicon Valley is still one of the best places in the world to build for innovators. There's still networks of talent there I think you have to work with, unfortunately, if you're going to be building. But it had not become a place where we wanted to scale our companies, that we were kind of scaling them all over the country because there's just way too expensive there. Like the spouses of executives I'd hire would hate me because you'd pay them $300,000 and they would barely be middle class coming to live in the Bay Area, right? It's very, very difficult. So it's much better to scale these things elsewhere. And the culture there has gone totally insane. Not only does my wife not feel safe, we have 4 young daughters now, and she doesn't feel safe walking around with our daughters in the city, but also there's no way we're sending them to those schools there. I used to consider myself fiscally conservative, socially liberal. That was kind of like the thing you'd say. But I think at this point, there's some really crazy things that qualify socially liberal. So now I say I'm socially moderate after having lived in the Bay Area.
You'd think that everyone in Silicon Valley would be sort of like that. People are pro-innovation, they're pro-free enterprise, and yet they don't seem to vote that way, or it doesn't seem like that's the political climate. I mean, you've obviously been an outspoken person for freedom. What's going on with that?
I mean, there's just different issues people prioritize. I think you saw things shift a little bit in California. I haven't seen exactly who's going to win in LA, and I think we've taken a lot of really extreme people in San Francisco and replaced them with a few moderates. And so you actually are seeing people wake up and say, "Wow, this is so broken that I have to pay attention to these issues." It's just people have just prioritized different issues. I think when you grow up, the tech ecosystem, especially the big tech companies, very much comes from the university culture. And our universities were frankly conquered over the last couple of generations by people who, I guess they're the intellectual heirs of Foucault, and they call them neo-Marxists, but whatever it is, it's like this really extreme, way of looking at the world. And these people have been brought up in those cultures. And that's just what they've been told their whole lives. And a lot of them aren't political people. So just by default, I think they vote that way.
You were here for our conversation with Jay Bhattacharya. It's one of the things about the COVID pandemic that was really, I think, stood out to me, I'm sure probably to you too, was just how aggressive the pressure was at Twitter, at YouTube, and these places to shut down the COVID debate. And that has led to a lot of people calling for regulating these platforms, saying, hey, you can't take down a YouTube account because somebody disagrees with a certain policy or whatever. What is the right way to ensure that we have freedom of debate on these platforms that become so important?
Yeah, it's very strangely authoritarian how these kind of really groups worked with DC, obviously. We've seen strong evidence now of coordination where DC was pressuring them to do coordinated censorship, which is crazy to think that would happen in the US. I don't think the answer is more government censorship. I think the whole point is that they need to be independent. I think Elon's answer is the right answer. I'm not allowed to say in public whether or not I'm working with him on that, actually, but I am a very big fan of what he's doing there.
We've all read the text messages.
That is true. There were a lot of text messages that came out that were quite embarrassing, but mine weren't as bad as some of my friends. You don't expect when you're texting your friend back and forth that it's going to be, in the national eye. But fortunately, some of his ones to me that were really bad, fortunately, they didn't mention Twitter. So, because he does the worst memes to his friends first, and then we say, no, don't put that online.
His public pronouncements have been kind of all over the place recently. He even said, look, I was trying to appease. He used the word appease. I was trying to appease the activists who think I'm going to let all the disinformation in and whatnot, and I was trying to appease them, and now they're trying to cancel all our advertisers. Where do you think he's going to end up? Is it going to be, he used to say he was a free speech absolutist. Now he's saying, well, there's going to be brackets. Where do you think is the right place for Twitter to end up? Whatever he's going to do, we'll see. But what do you think he should do?
Yeah, I mean, well, you've definitely seen the crazy people on the left like drive the people in their party to apostasy, right? Because a lot of these guys, Mark Andreessen, Elon, others, they were Clinton Democrats basically, and now they're just, I think some of them are more red-pilled than me now. It's like these people are just really reacting to this. I think he's going to keep getting attacked no matter what he does, and I really hope he ends up in a very pro-free speech place. I think. Listen, I'm Jewish on my mother's side. And I have a lot of respect for people who are really hurt and offended by Holocaust denialism. We had a lot of people in our family perish in the Holocaust, but I actually very strongly disagreed with Mark Zuckerberg when he banned Holocaust denying from the platform. I think that's actually a really dangerous step, because the more you start censor stuff, the more you censor other stuff. And I actually think that in a free society, letting people make stupid arguments and letting us argue against them is the best way for the truth to come out. I don't think it's our job to tell people what they can and can't say. And I really hope that's where it ends. I have a lot of really smart friends on the moderate left who strongly disagree with me, but I just don't see any regime where the censors aren't going to get it wrong again and again and again. I think that's the whole point of the First Amendment, and I really hope that's where he ends up.
We should note that one of your most important passion projects right now is you helped to found the University of Austin, which a lot of people in this room know about, and a place where academic freedom is the calling card, which has excited a lot of people in academia, potential students. They have this program. I was just hearing about it from Pano a couple days ago. They have this student program where the selectivity was greater than the Ivy League. It's incredible. Tell us a little bit about your involvement in that.
Yeah, so I guess I'm the chairman of the board of trustees. So I'm a co-founder with Barry Weiss, who's amazing. I learned a lot from her. Neil Ferguson as well. That's one of the probably greatest historians alive. And Pano's doing a great job running that. And we have a lot of other people working to help it as well. The goal, obviously, is to have one of the top universities in our country that are not controlled by the people I described controlling the rest of them right now. And you need to be a top place for innovation, and you need to have top innovators and top academics involved. One of the advantages we have, Avik, which is, you'll have to forgive me, this is very obnoxious and self-serving, but it used to be like almost all the smartest people went into academia. That was just the most interesting place. If you're intellectual, if you're dynamic, in the 1950s, 60s, before that, you're going to learn a lot more, experience a lot more, get to do things you couldn't do anywhere else. A lot of my brightest friends, who were like the smartest people I knew, were in PhD programs at MIT and Stanford and Caltech, and they dropped out and they went to our companies we were building, and they actually found more intellectual satisfaction at some of the very top innovation tech companies than they did in their PhD programs. They actually learned more, they got to do more, they got to express themselves in more complex ways. And so you've actually seen, I think people like Elon's a great example, a lot of the best and brightest in our country are not academics, they're innovators. And it's actually an advantage we have for the first time maybe this generation, is we could start new universities. We could have both top academics and these innovators involved, and because these innovators are actually pretty far ahead of a lot of what's going on in academia, that could give us a chance to actually outcompete and be better than Stanford, Harvard, MIT, et cetera.
You mentioned the tech workforce and the importance of having a good tech workforce. You wrote an op-ed recently, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, complaining about some of the bureaucratic hassles that have made it really hard to attract tech workers from around the world to hire for your company.
The visa system is just offensive, right? I work with people of all sorts of backgrounds, and I think there's two separate issues here. One issue is what do we do on skilled immigration? And this is a really important issue for our country, and we could disagree, and we can go into detail on what can we do for training, what can we do to bring in the best and brightest, like what works better for our country. I happen to think that it's positive sum and we should bring in a lot more bright people. But let's put that issue aside. We have a set of rules. We have people living here. We have people having kids here whose parents want to visit their kids, who have a right to visit their kids. And we take, in some cases, 2 years now to approve visas for these people who have a right to come here. This is extraordinarily offensive. These are my employees. These are my colleagues. It's just offensive. It's rude. We make them wait like tens of hours sometimes at the airports. It's just like, why are we treating our guests and our allies this way? It's not what a great country does. And you know what it is? It's a lack of accountability in the State Department and the places that are running this. So I mean, Canada also had all these COVID restrictions. They also has everything messed up. And they're also not very well run, by the way, but they're a fifth the time right now for visas than we are. And other countries are instant because they're electronic visa systems. Like, why are we making people wait hundreds of days when they already have a right to come here? And no one's been fired. There's been no investigations of it. It's just incompetent. And so, I think it's all of our jobs just not to accept incompetence every day from our government. When we see gross incompetence, we have to call it out. We have to investigate it. We have to replace the people that are screwing up.
So was there a response after you put out this op-ed? You had.
Yeah, it was great. All the Indians love me in Silicon Valley now because it's like.
I was going to say, like, when you call the government, people return your calls because you're Joe Lonsdale. So surely somebody's listening to you.
It's actually funny. A couple of people were going to work with the State Department on this. Said, "I really want your help." And then when they got there, those people at the State Department said, "No, don't call him. We don't want his help." So it is what it is.
One of the things that you've also done, you have a podcast called American Optimist, and you're a guy I know that really believes in the future of America. There's a lot of, I spoke about it this morning, there's a lot of energy on the right is this pessimism about the future of America.
It's this zero-sum nationalism. It's annoying. No, I think there's really two extreme options that are both wrong right now in our country. There's socialism, which we all know is zero-sum and destroys value and is a very negative view of the world where it's all about just redistributing it. And frankly, the right has this new statism that's coming up that's also zero-sum. It also kind of assumes that everything is like sort of broken and we need the government to step in to fix it and it's not going to be an optimistic future. And then there's the values of America. There's the abundance agenda where we say actually there's lots of ways that we can solve all of these problems within the values of a free society. We can solve public safety, we can solve healthcare, we can make all this stuff work better across our society. We can fix the regulatory state to be checked and reasonable and allow more growth. And there's all these obvious solutions to things that are broken right now that actually embrace the values of our country. And I'm really hoping this election was kind of a repudiation of both of those extremes and saying, listen, if a party is going to actually win, and actually, if you want a red wave, for example, on the right, you're going to actually need to embrace positive solutions versus like spending time on nonsense.
I mean, you interact with some of these pessimists yourself because you're very active in this space. I mean, when they make the argument, hey, they say people like us don't know what time it is, that we're almost at midnight of the American Republic. I mean, how do you make the case to them? What is it what have you found to be the most effective arguments for persuading people?
I've personally started 6 different companies valued over $1 billion that are all doing positive things, and they're all positive sum. And I've personally invested in tens more. And there's a bunch of them right now we're building right now that are curing diseases, that are fixing, making logistics work better, that are delivering healthcare for better results much more cheaply. And there's just across the board, like we're building defense that keeps America ahead. I mean, it's true. There's a lot of stuff in America that's broken. There's a lot of these little cancers that have metastasized, right? There's all these parts of our country. The defense industrial complex is far more broken than people realize. The special interests in healthcare are broken. Our universities are conquered. So there are these broken things, and we can either like just agree they should stay broken and kind of fight over the scraps, or we can get together and actually fight and build and push for the solutions that work. And it's frustrating to me there aren't more people on the good guy side trying to build, trying to fight for what works versus just kind of fighting over scraps.
Those of us in the policy world, we are often looking backwards, right? We're doing research by looking at historical data. We're not always looking at, and we're certainly not very good at projecting into the future. But guys like you're looking at the companies that are emerging, the ideas and industries
You're
that are
saying
emerging.
what's possible in 5 or 10 years based on what do we know is possible?
Yeah,
right?
no, I'm asking you. So you have a visibility into that because you're looking at all these interesting companies and startups. What do you think are the most exciting ideas out there in the private sector that can have the most social impact, that can have the most benefit for society?
And there's so much. I agree with a lot of people who have said the 21st century is, like, in some sense, a life sciences century, right? There's a revolution that's going on in biology where we learn more now every month than we used to every couple of years because there's all these new tools that allow you to test things and try things. And we're still kind of in the Stone Ages in terms of understanding the genome, understanding how to, so it used to be in pharma. You guys probably are up to speed on this. It used to be pharma, it was the chemists that ran everything, right? And so molecules were drugs. In the 1950s, the chemists would get together and figure that out. And you had something called biologics and genetic in the 80s, which is still relatively simple, but you're actually harnessing that. And now in the 2010s and 2020s, you have something called cell therapy, where you actually have cells that are the unit of medicine. So if this is like a biologic, like the whole building is a cell, right? And you actually can program cells to cure diseases. And there's lots of examples where this is already working. And there's hundreds more people are building, and there's all sorts of tools for the space that let you build these things, let you analyze, let you see how they work and what's happening. And so I'm very, very bullish on just curing all sorts of diseases with that. I'm very bullish on, in healthcare, we know how to deliver healthcare much more cheaply. This is purely a regulatory challenge at this point. Like you look at this, a lot of people look at this and say, oh, healthcare is really expensive, it's a crisis for our country. That is a regulatory challenge. I'll give you just a basic example. One of my good friends from Stanford, we grew up with, he's an allergist, and there's like an infinite line to see him. You can't see everyone who wants to see him. There's not enough allergists. And it's a joke because you know what? If we were allowed to do this without regulations screwing it up, you know what we do? You sit down with them. You sit down with two smart friends and say, okay, what's the system? We're going to have a website. You're going to enter the information. You're going to have your health records. You're going to fill it out. It's going to ask you questions. You're going to have a person who's paid $20 an hour check and confirm you did it right. Then the nurse is going to confirm above that as a boss that it's correct and you get your treatment. And if there's an exception, the doctor will see it. So you'd have one doctor, 10 nurses, 100 workers, a website that, like, my friend could be servicing 1,000 times as many people better because he has all the data, and the regulation doesn't let this happen. So it's like healthcare. The reason we should be optimistic is that it's like very easy to solve a lot of these issues and bring the costs down. The only reason for pessimism is that we have a bunch of cowards running our government that will just like defer to this stupid regulatory state that doesn't let us fix things. So then that's what we got to fix.
What do you think is the area in which you're most optimistic that's contrarian, meaning like everyone else is pessimistic about it, but you're really optimistic about?
I mean, I don't know, maybe global warming. I think there's lots of different, we can debate like sun cycle versus global warming. Let's assume that we agree that there's some man-made impact on the temperature of the Earth. We have the ability right now to build lots of fission plants. We very likely have the ability to scale up fusion in 2030s. There's companies that think they're going to get Q of 2 in the next 2 or 3 years. I know people have been saying it's coming for a while. It does seem like there's people investing billions of dollars on this now. It seems very likely. Even fusion aside, which I think is very likely in the next 10 or 20 years, we can, with fission right now, scale up fission plants and take carbon out of the atmosphere for a very small part of our GDP. The economic growth is so much more important than anything around global warming. When we take steps to reduce our growth because of global warming, it's comical because you can take a very tiny piece of that growth and apply it to these solutions and be carbon negative right away. So I think this is just like basically all of the socialists in the 1980s became environmentalists in the 1990s, and it's just the whole thing is just nonsense. So I don't know, maybe I'm contrarian on that. I'm not a denier. I just think there's like optimistic ways to fix this if we really care about it. And I think it's not as big of an issue as people think, but I think it's a scare tactic for our kids to bring them to big government.
Yeah, we had a panel earlier today on nuclear energy, and I mean, nuclear energy it was on energy in general, but nuclear energy is clearly an example of that, right? Because we could reduce carbon emissions massively in this country if we just
it's trivial. The whole thing is just like an issue for stupid people. Sorry. It's like
All right, we got that licked now. All right, I want to mention one other thing, and we'll open it up to some questions, which is let's talk about the Cicero Institute, which is the think tank you built. We talked about earlier. I'm fortunate enough. Thank you for inviting me to be on your advisor board. Love interacting with your scholars, and we have your chief policy officer, Judge Glock, who's also a visiting fellow at FREOPP, who's somewhere in the audience here and a panelist today. Tell us about the Cicero Institute. What motivated you to build it? What are you trying to do with your public policy work?
So we have a C3 and a C4. And a C4 means we're allowed to get things done. I'm a huge fan of FREOPP. Actually, hadn't seen it before we started it, and we have a lot of values in common. But what we're actually able to do is, in my view, you can get more things done in states than anywhere else. So our theory of change is that we actually help get legislation passed in states based on ideas we have that take the principles of a free society, much like yourself, and apply it to broken areas. And there's a lot of these things in our society that are kind of ripe for being fixed. So for example, public safety innovation is one. I'll give you two examples. One's public safety innovation. And a lot of people, some people call it criminal justice reform. I don't like that term because it's been used by a lot of people who've created a lot more crime around our country and have not done things in logical ways. But I think there's a mistake on the left of bad ideas that create more crime and that don't fix the system. There's a mistake on the right, though, of only wanting to lock people up and only being strong in crime but not trying to fix all this money we spend. When you spend money from the government without accountability, you're going to have bad stuff, right? So I don't care who you are. If you're spending money on prisons and probation and parole and there's no accountability, there's no metrics, they're not going to be performing well. And no matter how tough on crime you want to be, we can all agree that people who go into prisons, a lot of them are going to come out. And when they come out, I think whether you're left or right, you want them to be employed, you want to be employable, you want them not to come back. And so the question is, how do you put in systems of innovation and accountability that can iterate and make the good ideas win and bad ideas lose? And this is something we need in every area of our society. How do good ideas win? How do bad ideas lose? And in this case, there's just a lot of cool stuff we're getting passed in a bunch of states where you can totally change the culture of probation and parole departments by rewarding them for rehabilitation and for people not committing crimes. Prisons, there's prisons around the country that have really high recidivism are terrible, and there's really good ones. And how do you spread the really good ones? How do you replace the leadership of the bad ones? And this requires courageous legislators, because you actually have to put accountability in where you're going to replace the people running the broken ones, and you're going to reward the people doing well in the good ones. And sometimes you can only get the rewards passed because it's too hard to replace bad people, but even that's good enough to kind of shift a lot. So that's one area where the ideas work. I'll give you another example is vocational and training programs. I'm a big fan of vocational education. There's probably still today, even with the economy turned down, like 4 or 5 million jobs, unfilled vocational skills we need in America. And so a lot of good politicians like trying to do their duty are spending lots of money on vocational programs. Again, this is like we have to get this out of our habit of doing these things. We spend the money without any accountability. And so Texas did something really clever, as you know, I think about 7 years ago, is they said we're only going to fund these Texas technical schools, which is like a high-end vocational program, in proportion to the salaries of the students coming out their first 3 years. This is really key, because a lot of people say, oh, for accountability, we're only going to fund you if you graduate people. If you only fund them if they graduate people, they're just going to start graduating people, right? They're going to figure out a way to pass people. You have to base the metric on something they don't control. And what they don't control is the salaries. And so when Texas did this, over the next 5 years, salaries more than doubled. Because these schools all of a sudden had to say, what skills do we teach to actually get them jobs? What businesses do we partner with? And so we've taken that law at Cicero now to several other states as well. So we're working in a bunch of areas. We have a pretty big team. But it's all about like how do you put in transparency, accountability, incentives, the values that work in our innovation part of our society, and apply it to things that are broken. And it works.
That's fantastic. Yeah. You alluded to the midterms that took place a couple days ago.
Yes.
As we turn the corner from the midterms and go to 2024, there may be a number of people who run for president who try to hit you up, get your support.
I'm also a fan of DeSantis. I know you're not officially a fan of me, but I think I like what you said. I'm a big fan of DeSantis, and I'll probably speaking to him shortly, actually. We got a lot done in Florida philanthropically with our policy group. He's smart. He engaged with this stuff properly. I think the country needs to move on from Trump is my view.
Who else do you like out there of whatever party? Just who are some of the people you admire in public policy or public politics right now?
Glenn Youngkin, I think, is a great leader. He's a smart guy. He's maybe not quite as radical as I am or bold as I am. I'm kind of the VC guy. He's a PE guy, so he'll kind of go.
Those PE guys.
He'll buy a company and work with the people there.
They golf too much.
And I'm like, yeah, these people are going to make it. But no, he's a good guy. I definitely would support him as well. Although DeSantis is a little bolder for me. In terms of other people out there, for president, I guess.
For anything, yeah, whatever you like.
Nikki Haley's a friend. She's a smart person. I don't think she can win a nomination, but I think she's going to be important in the next administration. We got a lot of good governors who are going to get involved, but I'd have to say DeSantis is my favorite. Abbott's a good guy. I don't think he's gonna win on the national stage.
Great. Who's got some questions for Joe? Go ahead.
First of all, thank you so much for coming. My leftover question from Jay speaking was, in fact, about global warming and the scientific clarity about climate change, just in case he would like to widen the number of people from whom he could receive death threats.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful what you say in academia on these issues. Yeah.
But it's very similar because it's also all based on models that can't be validated and suppression of dissent. Look, everything you're doing is great. The one bone to pick I have about people like you that are on the superabundance platform is sometimes you think too much that technology is the answer rather than the idea and political environment. Now, you saw with COVID and with climate change how places where
What's the question?
The question is, could you do more to pay attention to that environment, because it can be more important than what it is that you're doing right, and it challenges the question about whether we're on the right path. We can't be on the right path without science.
Yep, so I think that's a good point. There's definitely a strain of like naive techno-optimism where just technology solves everything. And you saw us with Obama as well, where he built the digital service, and I actually liked a lot of the people he was hiring into the digital service. And the technology itself, the innovation itself, that wasn't enough. You need political courage. You need accountability for things that are broken. And so I think if you can put in a system of creative destruction like we have in the markets, to put in that transparency and accountability into these broken areas. And if you can elect the leaders who have the courage to do the right thing, and you combine that with innovation, hopefully both together can solve some problems.
Great. Bet in the back over there in the corner.
Hi, Neil Chilson from Stand Together. So you have taken your experience in the business world and moved into philanthropy. I work in the philanthropy space. What is philanthropy getting wrong right now? What could it do better? What are you guys doing that's new and different, and where did you come up with those ideas?
Sure. I was just with Brian. You guys are doing a pretty good job at Stand Together. But in general, I think you need to run these things like a business. So it's very difficult to get the best, hardest working people to go into philanthropy and stay in philanthropy because it's the cultures are not as functional as the cultures in the innovation world, and it's really hard to have the cultures be as functional because you don't have the same kind of drive to have to hit goals and profit and outcompete and et cetera. And so I think making these organizations look and feel as much like a functional startup as possible is really important. I think you got to take a lot of the lessons from your most functional startups, and you got to have the same types of goals and same types of aggression and same types of just putting in really, really bright people who normally wouldn't be there. Like one of the things I like to do is try to bring in just amazing people who might not choose to go to the philanthropic world, but I have them there and I have them helping me on something in the for-profit world, and I have it after they've done a great job there for 2 or 3 years, they're going to come build something with me. So they're kind of proving themselves, and so you kind of want to bring the talent between the two because that's one of the ways of accessing it. And then you want to have cultures where you're, I mean, we got 10 laws passed last year, we got 21 laws passed this year, and we actually had to remap like the whole process of how you're getting the laws passed and what strategy works, and you're debating it and trying it and you're learning. So just fast iteration, that kind of stuff that you take from the business world.
Great. Anyone else? Go ahead.
The question of K through 12 education. What's your view on the optimistic future there?
Yeah, so it's obviously a huge issue. The reason Cicero works more on the vocational and training and other stuff is that we try to do things that not everyone's already working on. So because I think K-12 is a very important issue that a lot of groups are working on. So rather than go with that, I decided to go other areas I could actually get things done. K-12, my wife and I discuss a lot about this. Like I'm very excited by the kind of increased school choice around our country. I think you need creative destruction. You need to be able to have ways things can fail, things that are working can grow. And I think we're finally kind of seeing people acknowledge that. I think the COVID mess was enough. The teachers' unions are kind of been pushed back on, and we're going at this. So I think that's definitely going in a really positive direction. The more we can make it really easy for people to start new things there and to compete, the more we can turn off the failing things, the better. So this is an issue a lot of people are working on, but it does seem like it's come into the public consciousness in a positive way.
Great. We got another, let's go over in the middle. There we go.
You mentioned immigration and the bureaucracy and all that problem that's bringing to us. What do you see any optimistic future regarding immigration policy in the U.S., especially with legal high school migration and how especially in the VC world?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who've been working on this very hard behind the scenes. Is FREOPP doing? We're not doing much. We're doing a little bit there, I guess.
We're in immigration? Yeah, we are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no. So
we have an immigration panel later.
Yeah, no, I know we've talked about it. So I'd love to get speed on what we're doing here. I have a few other friends groups who are also spending a lot of money on this the next few years, who think it's possible. Jared Kushner had something in the White House. Interestingly, there was like a 50, 60-page plan that he'd iterated on with a lot of people in Congress, including people on the left.
Very interesting plan.
Right, and he even got Pelosi aligned at one point that her staff told her she couldn't because she couldn't give Trump a win, of course. But I think there's some really interesting stuff where you can build off the Canadian system. You could take other ways of letting people who build startups come here and really get the high skilled one done. And for 20 years, we've been trying to do the whole comprehensive thing, and it's failed. And it seems like, if I was a betting man, I'd guess this decade we do get it done, and hopefully sooner rather than later. I think there's something on the high skilled side that's likely, though, because it's just so necessary, and a lot of people seem to agree on it.
Yeah, the Jared Kushner immigration plan is worth your time for those interested in that issue.
Yeah.
Yes.
I heard you had passed 30 laws, any of them in blue states, and if not, is there any Democrat that you also admire?
So yeah, the challenge. So it's interesting. So I'm at conference. I got to know Van Jones, who's a smart African American guy on the left, and he agrees with a lot of my public safety stuff I'm doing. And we talked about it. I said, I'd really love your help getting this stuff done in the blue states. And he said, Joe, I think you have to get it done in the red states first because there's going to be people on the far left who are not going to allow this accountability. And so he said, you'll get done in the red state, and then I'll tell the sob stories and play it up emotionally and show how it's helping people, and I'll kind of pull it into the blue states. And that's how we have to do it. And that's generally been my experience with every policy that involves accountability right now in this country, is you get moderate Democrats to agree with you. They're really excited about it. Someone around the governor kills it because it has accountability, and the government unions are too strong when the left's in charge of a state. And so we kind of have to get a lot more done in the red states first and then kind of bring it over there. We do work in Wisconsin a bit, in some states with some mixed legislators and whatnot, and we are to get some things done there. And by the way, most of the laws we pass are passed in a bipartisan way. So there's actually people on both sides voting for them. You get 70, 80, 90% of people voting for a lot of things we're doing. But to get these really strong accountability policies through for right now in America, that's happening on the right.
Last question. Let's go. I saw yeah, right over there. Sorry, hard for me to see.
Hey, Joe. 2 questions about 2 different areas of tech that are very exciting, AI and crypto. They're exciting for different reasons, obviously. Do you think crypto has a big future, especially given the tumult over the last couple of days? And then with AI, a lot of the institutions that we complain about, like whether it's the New York Times or the bureaucracies, it's becoming increasingly clear that they might be the thing that's threatened most by large language models and all this innovation that's going on. So can you give me, in the AI case, your sort of 10-year projection?
Sure. On the crypto side, our fund chose not to do Web3 at all. So I have a little bit of Schadenfreude now watching a lot of this stuff blow up really violently, because we had like smart kids like telling us how wrong we were the last 5 years. And I think when you're investing in venture capital, it's really important that you say what's the gap in the economy, what's the value you're creating, what's the actual economic process you're fixing and making worth more. And the vast, vast majority of the Web3 stuff was much more a Ponzi scheme than it was solving any problems. And so I'm really glad we avoided that in general. And I think crypto itself, I'm very pro kind of like the liberty angle of governments not controlling all of our money in the long term. And I still think in the future there will be something there that's very important. And you could definitely see a world where the economy gets really bad and governments are blowing up and people switch over to Bitcoin. It's kind of like the thing that happens in a really crazy world. But for now, for the last 3 years, it's mostly traded A, like a high growth tech asset, which has been tough the last couple of years, and then B, had these like scammy things blowing up, which is probably good for the world for scammy things like that to blow up. Then the money can go towards solving real problems and not towards trading monkey JPEGs, as some people say. But and then on the AI front, obviously AI is a really, really interesting, really important area. It used to be all of our companies, like, they used to say, oh, it's a cloud company, and now like every company uses the cloud. And a lot of people say, oh, it's an AI company, and now every company uses AI, right? So AI is part of everything we do. You're not doing your job right if there's not AI in some part. Like I have a defense company, it's the best EMP company in the world, and it uses AI to like make the power all hit within nanoseconds and fire and take out the bad guys with a blast of microwave radiation. They can fire miles to turn off electronics. So there's every company uses AI now. In terms of the interesting thing that is changing, of course, you guys have all seen the generative AI, which is crazy, right? So you can all of a sudden write and have pictures created, have articles created. Within a few years, you're gonna be able to type descriptions and have whole videos, whole movies created. You can have like 3 people singing together, make a whole movie just by iterating on directions and saving pieces of it. So where does that go in 10 years? Yeah, it does impact just our entire society in terms of our experience of reality. And I think that does end up tying into augmented reality and all sorts of crazy things we don't have time to talk about right now. But it's a very important area.
Well, we're out of time, but Joe, we covered a lot of ground, so I really appreciate your time. Thanks for all you do.
Yeah.